This is Yoshida. Today, I would first like to explain the consolidated financial results for the second quarter of the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2022. Consolidated net sales for this second quarter of this fiscal year was up 2.8% year-on-year and up 13.6% quarter-on-quarter to total 281.955 billion yen. Operating income totaled 25.005 billion yen, which was 42.8% up year-on-year and up 27.4% quarter-on-quarter. Profit for the period attributable to owners of the parent increased 54.4% year-on-year and 39.1% quarter-on-quarter for a total of 20.393 billion yen. Net sales, operating income, and quarterly profit all hit second quarter record highs. We estimate the foreign currency translations have a year-on-year impact of plus 10.4 billion yen in net sales and plus 2.8 billion yen in operating income. Quarter-on-quarter impact was plus 1.7 billion yen in net sales and plus 1.5 billion yen in operating income. We made slight retrospective changes to last fiscal year's financial statements due to the PPA for ABLIC. Please note that the figures on the following pages are revised figures. Next slide, please. This is the summary result for the first half. For items, we have hit the first half record highs as well. Going to the next slide. This is the quarterly trend in net sales, operating income, and operating margin. The operating margin for the second quarter was 8.9%. This was up 2.5 percentage point year-on-year and up 1.1 percentage points quarter-on-quarter. Next slide, please. This is the difference between the forecast as of August and actual results for net sales and operating income by business segment for the second quarter. Net sales for the machine components business segment was slightly lower than projected due to a slowdown in sales to the automobile industry caused mainly by a shortage of semiconductors. The electronic devices and components business saw lower than expected net sales due primarily to lagging sales of automotive motors and backlights caused by a shortage of semiconductors. The Mitsumi business enjoyed higher than projected sales for mechanical components, optical devices, analog semiconductors, and so on. The U-Shin business experienced lower than expected sales due to a slowdown in automobile production. Operating income for the machine components business segment was almost on par with the forecast. The electronic devices and components business experienced lower than expected operating income due to a decline in sales. The Mitsumi business operating income surpassed the forecast thanks to higher than expected sales of optical devices and semiconductors, as well as further improvement in the profitability of semiconductors. The U-Shin business experienced lower than expected operating income due to a decline in sales. Next slide, please. Now, let's take a look at the quarterly trend by segment, starting with the machine components business segment. On the left is a graph indicating quarterly net sales trends. On the right is a graph it shows on the bar chart for quarterly operating incomes along with a line chart for operating margins. Second quarter net sales was almost on par with the previous quarter at 44.3 billion yen. Ball bearing sales dipped 1.1% quarter-on-quarter to total 31.9 billion yen. The monthly external shipment volume was down 2% quarter-on-quarter for an average of 241 million units. This is due primarily to a slowdown in sales to the automotive sector. Sales of aircraft bearings remained sluggish due to the stagnant market. Sales of rod ends and fasteners totaling 6.5 billion yen were up 1.6% from the previous quarter. Sales of pivot assemblies increased 8% quarter-on-quarter to total 5.9 billion yen. Operating income for the quarter totaled 11.9 billion yen, and the operating margin continued to recover at 26.9%. Operating income rose 9% quarter-on-quarter, while the operating margin improved 2.1 percentage points. Looking at the results by product, we see that the operating income for ball bearings and pivot assemblies increased quarter-on-quarter, while operating income for rod ends and fasteners was about the same with last quarter. For ball bearings, profit increased while sales decreased quarter-on-quarter, thanks to high utilization rates on top of improved productivity. Going to the next slide. Now let's look at the electronic devices and components segment. Net sales increased 3.6% quarter-on-quarter to hit 93.7 billion yen. Looking at the results by product, we see the sales of motors increased 3% quarter-on-quarter to reach 66.1 billion yen. Although sales was impacted by reduced automotive production due to semiconductor shortages, sales mainly for HDDs remained robust. Sales for electronic devices were on par quarter-on-quarter to total 17.3 billion yen. Sales of sensing devices totaling 9.3 billion yen were up 16.8% from the previous quarter. Operating income came to 6.1 billion yen and operating margin was 6.5%. Operating income fell 23.2% quarter-on-quarter, while the operating margin dropped 2.2 percentage points. Excluding the one-time recovery of costs from the past fiscal years, which was recognized in the previous quarter, and the impact of the one-time cost due to the effects of the COVID-19 and semiconductor shortages, profits would have substantially increased. Looking at the results by product, although the operating income for sensing devices was up and the operating income for electronic devices was down, while operating income for motors about the same in the previous quarter. For your reference, figures shown on the fiscal year ended March 2021 was before based on the classifications used before changes to the business segments were made. Please note that the same applies to the rest of the presentation.
Next slide, please. Let's look at the performance for the Mitsumi Business segment. Net sales increased 44.6% quarter-on-quarter to total 111 billion yen. As the seasonal demand picked up, so did the sales of optical devices and mechanical components, along with sales of analog semiconductors and other products, which were also boosted by strong demand. Operating income came to 11.3 billion yen, and the operating margin was 10.2%. On a quarter-on-quarter basis, operating income increased 2.2 times, while the operating margin rose 3.6 percentage points. The primary factors behind these increases include a further increase in the profitability of analog semiconductors in addition to seasonal demand. Moving on to the next slide. Finally, let's look at the U-Shin Business segment. Net sales were down 11.3% quarter-on-quarter to hit 32.7 billion yen. This was due to production adjustments by some automakers due to the semiconductor shortage. While our operating loss totaled 0 billion yen, the operating margin was minus 0.1%. Next slide, please. The bar graph here shows trends in profit attributable to owners of the parent, while the line graph charts changes in the profit for the period per share. The profit for the period was 20.4 billion yen. Earnings per share was 50.4 yen. Next slide, please. Next, we have the quarterly inventory trend. At the end of the second quarter, inventory totaled 214.1 billion yen, which is 18.6 billion yen more than what it was 3 months ago. This was due to a strategic increase in the inventory of raw materials, etc., as well as a postponement in shipments of some products requested by the customers. Next slide, please. The bar chart in this graph shows trends in net interest-bearing debt, which is total interest-bearing debt minus cash and cash equivalents, and the line chart indicates free cash flow. At the end of the second quarter, net interest-bearing debt totaling 90.2 billion yen was up 5.8 billion yen from what it was at the end of the previous fiscal year. Moving on to the next slide, we made upward revisions to the full-year forecast for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2022. Which was announced in August. We expect 1,050 billion yen for net sales and have revised the forecast for operating income to 90 billion yen. The estimated net sales figures for the machined components, electronic devices and components, and Mitsumi Business were revised up, while the estimated net sales figure for the U-Shin Business was revised down since it will be significantly affected by the slowdown in automotive production due to the shortage of semiconductors. Overall sales forecast remains unchanged. After revising the estimated operating income figures in light of the revised sales figure estimates, we made an upward revision to the operating income forecast. The exchange rate assumption is 110 yen to the US dollar. The next slide, please. This slide shows a forecast by business segment. Thank you for listening.